Have you ever wondered if true strength is found in walking alone, or if it's something deeper, something that only solitude can reveal? In a world that constantly urges us to be surrounded by people, to belong, to fit in, there's a profound power in stepping away from the crowd. But what if walking alone isn't a sign of weakness? What if it's the very place where we discover the strength and purpose God has uniquely planted in us? C.S. Lewis once said, "Solitude is not something you must seek for its own sake, but it is in solitude that God often refines us, builds our character, and strengthens our faith in ways we can't even imagine." Today, we're diving into the strength of a woman walking alone, not because she has to, but because God is calling her to a deeper, more powerful connection. We'll explore how solitude, friendship, and divine connection work together to create a life of spiritual independence and unwavering faith. So, whether you find yourself walking alone in this season or seeking deeper connection with God, this video is for you. Let's begin this journey together. 1. Solitude as a space for spiritual strength. In our fast-paced world, solitude is often misunderstood as a state of emptiness or loneliness. However, true solitude is a sacred space where God's voice can be heard more clearly, unclouded by the noise and distractions of everyday life. It is in the quiet that we find a deeper connection with our Creator, where His presence becomes the loudest and most profound voice in our hearts. Far from being empty, solitude becomes a fertile ground for spiritual growth, where we are refined and renewed in God's presence. Psalm 46:5 offers a powerful truth. God is within her, she will not be shaken. This verse reminds us that the strength we need does not come from external sources, but from within, from the indwelling presence of God. Even in moments of isolation or struggle, we are reminded that His presence in us is unshakable. We are anchored, not by the approval or support of others, but by the unwavering strength that comes from trusting in God's divine purpose for our lives. Moreover, solitude fosters spiritual independence. When we walk alone, we are freed from the constant pull of seeking validation or approval from others. This independence doesn't come from isolation, but from the intimate connection we develop with God. It's a place where our worth is not defined by others' opinions, but by our identity in Christ. Through solitude, we discover the profound freedom of relying solely on God's voice and direction for our lives. 2. The feminine strength of walking alone. Walking alone is often misinterpreted as a sign of loneliness or weakness, but in reality, it can be a powerful expression of inner strength and divine purpose. The difference lies in why a woman chooses solitude. Walking alone out of necessity or by choice, rooted in trust in God's plan, is vastly different from feeling isolated or abandoned. The former is a decision to listen to God's voice and follow His lead, while the latter can be driven by external circumstances or a sense of disconnection. A woman who walks alone with purpose understands that her journey is not defined by societal expectations or the approval of others. In fact, it is often in these solitary moments that she finds clarity and conviction in her own identity and calling. This kind of walk is not one of emptiness, but of intentionality. It is a chance to tune out the noise of the world and draw closer to God, whose voice becomes louder in the silence. This is where confidence comes into play. Walking alone doesn't mean walking in weakness, it means walking with strength, knowing that God's presence is her constant companion. It is a declaration of faith that her worth is not measured by the crowd's applause, but by God's purpose for her life. So I encourage every woman to embrace these moments of solitude, not as a burden, but as an opportunity to show the world that strength often blooms in the quiet, purposeful walk with God. 3. The challenge of solitude. The struggle with isolation. Solitude, though often seen as a path of strength and self-discovery, can also bring its own set of emotional struggles. For many women, the journey of walking alone is not always easy. Feelings of loneliness, doubt, and fear can creep in during the quiet moments. In a world that celebrates connection, being alone can feel like a weight, especially when society values relationships, popularity, and external validation. During these moments, it's easy to question one's worth, wonder if the path is the right one, or even fear being forgotten. Yet, it is precisely in these vulnerable times that a woman discovers her greatest strength. It is in the depths of solitude that God often refines her faith, builds resilience, and teaches her to rely on His strength. The emotional struggles she faces in isolation become the soil in which her spiritual growth takes root. By confronting these feelings and turning to God, a woman learns that she is not truly alone. God is always with her, even in the silence. The enemy knows that these moments of isolation can be fertile ground for discouragement. He whispers lies, planting seeds of doubt, suggesting that she's abandoned or unworthy. However, a woman who trusts in God can recognize these lies for what they are, deceptions meant to derail her spiritual journey. Instead of succumbing to discouragement, she can use these feelings as opportunities to deepen her relationship with God, knowing that in her solitude, she is not isolated but intimately connected to the one who sustains her. 4. Solitude versus isolation. A shift in perspective. In today's fast-paced, hyper-connected world, it's easy to confuse solitude with isolation, but the two are vastly different. Solitude is intentional. It's a conscious choice to step away from the noise and distractions of daily life to seek a deeper connection with God. It's in these quiet moments that we often hear His voice the clearest. Isolation, on the other hand, can feel forced and disconnected. It's when circumstances or external pressures push us into loneliness, making us feel abandoned, unwanted, or cut off from the world around us. While both involve being alone, the experience of solitude is filled with purpose and potential, whereas isolation can breed feelings of emptiness and despair. When we embrace purposeful solitude, we open the door to transformation. Rather than seeing alone time as a burden, we can view it as a divine opportunity for personal growth, reflection, and spiritual renewal. It is in solitude that we can strip away the distractions of life and focus solely on God, praying, meditating, and allowing His presence to fill the silence. It is here that we often grow the most, learning to trust in His guidance and finding clarity about our purpose. The shift in perspective from seeing solitude as isolation to seeing it as a sacred space for growth changes everything. In moments of solitude, God is not absent. He is preparing us for something greater, refining us into the person He has always intended us to be. 5. Divine connection. Embracing God's presence in solitude. In moments of solitude, a woman is never truly alone. While the world may view solitude as a form of isolation, for the woman who seeks God, it becomes a sacred space of divine connection. God's presence fills the silence, offering a companionship that is not only fulfilling but transformative. This connection transcends human relationships, bringing a peace that surpasses understanding and a strength that only His presence can provide. It is in these quiet moments that God can speak the loudest, offering guidance, reassurance, and the deep intimacy that only comes from being in His presence. Jesus Himself demonstrated the importance of solitude. In Luke 5:16, we read that Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Despite His ministry's demands and the crowds that followed Him, Jesus understood the necessity of retreating to solitude to reconnect with the Father. These moments of withdrawal were not just about physical rest, but about spiritual renewal. By spending time alone with God, Jesus refocused His purpose, found strength for His mission, and deepened His relationship with the Father. For a woman walking alone, solitude becomes a powerful opportunity to follow Jesus' example, taking time away from the distractions of the world to listen for God's voice. In those quiet moments, she finds not loneliness, but the richest form of companionship, one that fortifies her spirit, strengthens her purpose, and deepens her divine connection. Solitude, when embraced as a space for connection with God, transforms from a place of isolation into a sanctuary of spiritual growth. 6. The spiritual independence of a woman walking alone. A woman who walks alone spiritually self-sufficient, embodies a strength that comes from within, rooted in a deep connection with God. This independence is not about isolation or rejection of relationships, but rather about anchoring her identity and purpose in God's calling, rather than in the approval or validation of others. In a world where external validation often dictates worth, a spiritually self-sufficient woman knows her value comes from God's love and purpose alone. She is confident in her journey, knowing that the path He has set before her is the one she must walk, regardless of society's opinions or expectations. The freedom found in solitude is transformative. In the quiet, a woman is freed from the noise of the world and the pressures to conform to societal standards of success, beauty, or achievement. Solitude allows her to shed the weight of comparisons and external influences, focusing solely on her relationship with God. Here, she can live authentically, without compromise, as her decisions are guided by divine wisdom, rather than the fleeting approval of others. It is in solitude that she discovers her true self, not defined by the roles others expect her to play, but by the woman God has created her to be. This spiritual independence doesn't make her less connected to the world, but more grounded in her faith. By walking alone, she becomes deeply attuned to God's voice, confident in His purpose for her life, and empowered to walk the road He has set before her with courage and grace. 7. The role of friendship, balancing relationships. Walking alone can be empowering, offering a space for spiritual growth, reflection, and self-discovery. Yet, solitude doesn't mean isolating oneself from relationships. The role of healthy, supportive friendships remains essential in any woman's journey. While solitude can strengthen her connection with God and reinforce her sense of purpose, it's important to remember that friendships can also be a source of encouragement and accountability. However, the key is balance. Friendships should never define a woman's worth or distract her from her divine purpose. Too often, society places immense value on being surrounded by people, pushing the idea that belonging to a social circle equals success or happiness. But a woman who walks alone knows that her worth is rooted in her relationship with God, not in her social status or number of friends. Healthy friendships should empower her to grow, encourage her to trust God's calling, and help her stay aligned with her values. Godly friendships, in particular, play a vital role in this balance. These are relationships where mutual support leads to spiritual growth, where conversations are filled with wisdom and encouragement, and where friends help each other stay focused on their divine purpose. They don't drain energy or pull away from a woman's spiritual journey, but instead uplift and refine her. So, while walking alone can strengthen a woman's faith, seeking godly friendships, those that align with her values and purpose, can provide her with the support and strength needed to continue her journey with greater confidence and joy. 8. Empowered examples of women in the Bible. The Bible offers powerful examples of women who, though walking solitary paths, discovered divine purpose and strength in their solitude. Ruth is one such example. After the loss of her husband, Ruth found herself alone in a foreign land. Yet, rather than succumbing to despair, she chose to trust in God's plan, saying to her mother-in-law Naomi, "Your people will be my people, and your God my God." Ruth 1:16. Ruth's decision to walk alone, without the companionship of a husband, led her directly into God's divine blessing. Her faithful obedience brought her to Boaz, where she found both love and a place in God's greater redemptive story. Similarly, Esther faced a solitary journey when she was called to risk her life for her people. Before stepping into her moment of destiny, she spent days in fasting and prayer, seeking God's guidance in solitude. She relied on God's strength, not her own, to approach King Xerxes and save the Jewish people. Her courage was born in those quiet moments of divine connection, demonstrating how solitude can become a place of spiritual empowerment. Lastly, Mary, the mother of Jesus, walked a path of solitary faith when she accepted God's will to bear the Savior of the world. Even though her journey was filled with uncertainties and challenges, Mary trusted in God's plan, embracing the calling in complete submission. Her solitude during this time didn't signify weakness, but deep, unwavering trust in God's sovereign will. Through her, we see that walking alone with God can lead to the fulfillment of extraordinary purposes. 9. Personal transformation through solitude. In our busy, noise-filled world, the moments of silence and solitude are often overlooked or feared. However, these moments offer profound opportunities for personal transformation. When a woman steps into solitude, she enters a space where the distractions of the world fall away, allowing her to reconnect with her truest self and her divine purpose. In the silence, she can hear the whispers of her heart and the guidance of God more clearly, untangled from the chaos of everyday life. Solitude becomes a sacred space for spiritual reflection. It's in these quiet moments that she can pause, look inward, and assess her life through God's lens. In solitude, healing takes place, whether it's emotional wounds, past regrets, or struggles of self-doubt. These are the times when God refines her spirit, strengthening her understanding of who she is and why she is here. She begins to see her weaknesses as areas where God's grace shines the brightest, and her strengths as tools to fulfill her divine calling. This connection with God in solitude also deepens her faith. As she faces the quiet challenges of walking alone, her reliance on God strengthens. She learns to trust Him more fully, knowing that He is her constant companion. Solitude builds resilience, making her faith more focused and steadfast. Over time, this transformation leads to a woman who is more self-aware, grounded in her purpose, and deeply anchored in her trust in God's plans for her life. 10. The power of discernment in solitude. In a world that constantly bombards us with noise, social media updates, opinions from friends and family, the fast-paced demands of work and life, solitude becomes a sacred space where a woman can hear God's voice more clearly. In the quiet, away from distractions, she can focus her heart and mind, tuning into the divine guidance that often gets drowned out by the world's clamor. This is where true discernment begins, in the stillness when she listens for God's whisper, leading her toward decisions that align with her unique calling and purpose. Solitude is a space where clarity emerges. Without the noise of external influences, a woman can reflect deeply on her circumstances, her desires, and her relationship with God. In this reflection, she learns to discern between her own thoughts and the divine nudges that come from God's Spirit within her. It is in solitude that the path ahead often becomes clearer, as God reveals the next steps in her journey with precision and peace. Additionally, solitude helps her avoid the pressures and conformity of the world. Society often pushes us to conform to trends, expectations, and popular opinions. In solitude, however, she can strip away these distractions, discerning what truly matters in God's eyes. This freedom from societal pressures empowers her to make choices that are in harmony with her faith and divine purpose, rather than being swayed by the fleeting desires of the world. Solitude, then, becomes not just a retreat but a powerful tool for spiritual clarity and growth. 11. The reward of spiritual solitude. In a world where validation often comes from likes, followers, and external praise, the true rewards of spiritual solitude are far deeper and more lasting. In Matthew 6:6, Jesus tells us, "But when you pray, go into your room, close the door and pray to your Father, who is unseen. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." This powerful verse reminds us that God honors those who seek Him in the quiet, hidden places. The rewards of solitude aren't found in the applause of others, but in the intimate moments with God that transform us from the inside out. Spiritual solitude is a time of deep reflection and growth. It's where God refines us, removing distractions and guiding us toward our true purpose. When a woman embraces solitude, she steps into a space of intentionality, free from the noise of the world, and listens to God's voice more clearly. In these moments, her heart becomes aligned with His will, and she gains clarity on her unique calling and purpose. Rather than living for external approval, she learns to trust God's process, knowing that His affirmation is far more fulfilling than any earthly recognition. Through solitude, she becomes the woman He created her to be, resilient, focused, and deeply connected to the divine. The solitude she once feared becomes a sacred space for spiritual growth, purpose, and transformative strength. True fulfillment, then, isn't about fitting in. It's about being fully known by God and walking in the purpose He has set before us. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the strength of walking alone with God. I hope this video has inspired you to embrace solitude as a space for spiritual growth, deep connection, and divine purpose. Remember, true fulfillment doesn't come from the world's approval, but from the quiet moments when you align your heart with God's plan for your life. If this message resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share in the comments below. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment of encouragement. If you're ready to walk confidently in the strength of solitude, type Amen in the comments to declare your trust in God's plan for your journey. Thank you for being here, and remember, you are never truly alone. God walks with you every step of the way. Amen.